sanction would really only target small banks. It really wouldn't cripple the top 3 banks in Russia or really cripple the Russian economy in any way. What are the top sanctions that you would support that you feel like would stop Putin?
Yeah, why don't you pull your mask down and try again?
We've been talking about sanctions for so long on Russia. What are the top sanctions you feel would actually stop Putin in his tracks? Because some of the stuff that's being talked about would only affect small banking institutions, really wouldn't cripple the Russian economy in any way. What do you feel like you could support that would actually stop him?
Well, I'm not an expert on this, but the uber sanctions, the ones that really could bring the Russians to their knees, are related to the banking system. And I know the president, according to what he has said publicly, has been discussing the possibility of that happening with Putin. But to go back to my initial statement, I think what we ought to be doing right now, before the invasion occurs, send the Ukrainians weapons they can fight with, anti-tank weaponry, ground-to-air missiles, give them a chance to inflict some real damage on the Russians if they, in fact, come in. It's also important, I think, to beef up NATO presence in countries like Poland and the Baltics. And those NATO troops ought to include some American troops as further evidence to our Eastern NATO members and allies that we're going to have their back if the Russians decide to try to take a NATO country.
Leader McConnell, does that include on the Electoral Count Act? Can I,
Yeah.
You've expressed some support for that. Now, the bipartisan group that's looking at that appears to be looking at things beyond the text of that statute, things like funding and things like protecting election officials. Is that going to gain Republican support?
Yeah, the best way to characterize how I feel about the Electoral Count Act is that it is flawed and does need to be fixed. Where it goes from here, we'll have to see. I think the bipartisan group is working on trying to come up with a proposal. I don't have any particular view beyond that, other than that particular law is clearly flawed and needs to be updated.
President Trump's statement over the weekend saying that the former vice president could have overturned the election, does that increase the urgency for Congress to act on that law?
What were you?
That was the same question.
Yeah, I've already addressed.
Leader McConnell, no doubt China is watching very closely to see what sort of sanctions are going to be brought against Russia. Do you think if not enough is brought against Russia that China could actually start thinking about invading Taiwan?
Well, we're worried about how the Chinese read our reaction to the Russian potential incursion into Ukraine as it relates to Taiwan. There's no question about it. I think our big power adversaries, the Russians and the Chinese, watch what happened in Afghanistan, have serious doubts about whether America will stand with its allies. So I think how we handle the Ukrainian situation does have implications in the Pacific as well.
Leader McConnell, would Lend-Lease to Ukraine